as I'm writing my thesis, I was writing my thesis, Colored Bodies Matter, the relationship between our bodies and power. I realized that you think it's insidious, right? Like you think that when you hear about racism in the criminal system and everybody, or you hear about these particular stories that people think are, these tragic anomalies, but they believe that it's something you have to parse out. Like you need to go get a magnifying glass, some statistics, an investigator, and all this to figure out that the system is racist. No, child, that is not the case. I realized from the very first time walking in the court as a public defender, like, oh no, it's on its face. This is on its
Yes.
face. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I'm like, if this is on its face in this transparent way, like an example I always tell is I was once same back to back, right? Pile of cases. I represented a Black guy that was accused of when weed was still fake legal,
Yes,
fake
legal.
decriminalized in New York City. There was a Black guy and they were asking for thousands of dollars of bail on him for allegedly smoking a blunt. Me immediately after I represented a white guy found with a bag of drugs, right? Obviously, dealer, consent to release. Same judge, same prosecutor, just consent to release.
And tell me what consent to release means.
Consent to release means we're not going to put up an argument. We are going to agree, the prosecutor and the judge, that we're just going to agree to release them. So like normally at arraignment, so the prosecutor, the Black guy, I ask the judge, hey, I want my client released on his own recognizance. And then the prosecutor goes, no, I don't want that. I want this amount of money for them. So when I had the white client, the prosecutor then goes, we consent to release. And the judge says,
wow.
Okay. And that's how it always would go. It would always go that way. More often than not, every time on the rare occasion I represent a white person, the case goes nowhere. Like I've never had a white client for more than 3 appearances. Like,
and you know what? I think, of course, a lot of people still think, oh, it's New York, though. It's New York. It's not It's New York. It's America.
It's funny. And I think it's funny how that myth gets spread, right? Like I always think that's interesting that New York City is simultaneously painted like this is progressive blue utopia with all this diversity, while also being painted as Gotham City with one of the most racial, like, let me put it to you this way. Rikers is over 95% Black and brown. There are over 10 million people in New York City, 42% of whom identify as white. So why is Rikers, a place that's been open for over 100 years, over 90% Black or brown? We think that's a coincidence? And none of those, 85% of everybody at Rikers has not been convicted of a crime. They are pre-trial. So is it a coincidence that a city with 10 million people, 42% of whom are white, the vast majority in its pre-trial detention centers are just people who are too poor to afford bail and are being held in one of the most a human rights crisis, an abomination of a pretrial detention center. They're all just conveniently Black or brown.
Well, it goes to show why when Jordan Neely's life was taken on this train in New York, I think a lot of people were surprised that New Yorkers were so in support of this situation, especially this mayor. And it goes to show, like, no, this is a city that's in a state, that's in a country that is racist to the core and still has in its constitution that slavery is legal if you are convicted, or if you're even in a situation where you could be convicted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it never looks at the system in its entirety. Jordan Neely is a perfect example of so many different aspects of the way that New York criminalizes poor and Black and brown people, because Jordan Neely is somebody who has failed on a myriad of different levels.
Right.
Funny enough, one of my colleagues and friends was his attorney at Legal Aid, was his attorney for many years. So I was already familiar with Jordan Neely before that even happened.
Oh, wow.
Because he's somebody she'd been trying to get help for years. Like they had been showing, if you've seen the videos of him performing on the subway, how that happened was Jordan Neely's mom was killed like many years ago.
Yes.
So that combined with mental health, brutally murdered. So think about how that impacts. It's funny when they talk about crime, I always think it's interesting. They will make crime out to be Black or brown, Black on Black, and all this different things. But how are we simultaneously the defendants and the victim, and you still don't give any kind of humanity, right? Because when you look at it, the Jordan Neely, who these people will justify that the system should be abusing them and it should have criminalized him and all of this, but it will never look at the failure. Like crime isn't thought of. He isn't thought of somebody who was a victim of crime when he lost his mother, right? Nobody looks at how the system had failed them up until that point and how it's failed them afterwards. But suddenly he's just purely the defendant. There is never this acknowledgement that the same people in our communities that you are, labeling the criminals and the criminal defendants are also the same people on the receiving end. They are in that same community receiving all of this suffering and trauma and these failures of the system. So Jordan Neely is a compounded effect of the way that New Yorkers are forsaken, between his homelessness, between his mental health, between the criminal system continuously just funneling him in and out of the system. And that's also something I think is interesting. They'll talk about his rap sheet and how many cases he have, but that never becomes evidence of the system's failure. Whenever the system was obviously already involved, right? Why is that not a reflection of the fact that continuing to criminalize this person who is homeless, we know have mental health issues, has not led them to not get into running with the laws? That has not helped them at all, right? So is that not a reflection of the system failing? But no.